Good evening, this is News.PH, but it's not politics as usual. I'm Pia Ontiveros. Vice President Jojo Binay is taking a very bad political beating. Joining us to talk about that are representatives from both sides, or at least we had hoped. Congressman Edgar Erice of the Liberal Party is here, and Attorney J.V. Bautista, supposedly to speak for the Vice President, was supposed to join us, but we're told that he's still on his way here. However, we need to start the show right away. Congressman Erice, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Pia.
Can you tell us, well, of course you weren't at the cabinet meeting today, but I guess you heard the news, what it was supposedly like.
Yes, I think Vice President Binay finally attended the cabinet meeting, and I think it's a show for him because he's not attending meetings. It's only now when the president publicly said that. If he has some suggestions or he has some thoughts, he should express this during cabinet meetings, not in public.
Okay, so maybe that's why he.
Yes,
he
I think
he
it's a
went to the
show for
cabinet
him.
meeting. Show.
Everything is a show for him.
A show.
It's not about telling the truth. It's not about doing his job. It's all about strategy for winning 2016.
Okay.
So no matter who got hurt, kahit na siguro paglaruan niya ang Pangulo, gagawin niya para lamang may sulong niya yung kanyang political ambition.
Well, he was told by President Aquino, as you also mentioned, you can leave anytime. Why
That's
do you
a
think
clear
he won't?
message.
Yeah. Why do you think he won't break with the president, as he said so?
Ang sinasabi niya, malaki ang utang na loob niya sa pamilya ng Pangulo. Sinasabi niya na he respects the president. Pero maraming beses sinasaksak niya sa likod ang Pangulo. For example, in the Zamboanga siege, the president is there manning the problem, pero he's in Manila, sabi niya merong ceasefire. Wala namang sinasabi ang Pangulo. He's undermining the president for his own political purpose. Sabi niya, nakausap niya si Miss Wari. So, at ginamit niya pa si Secretary Bolts Gasmin. Wala namang, dininay naman ito ni Secretary Gasmin. Sa DAP, he was a beneficiary of DAP, his agency. Pero kinikriticize niya at ng kanyang partido yung DAP, samantalang alam niya na ito ay malapit sa puso ng Pangulo dahil maraming mga programang gobyerno ang naipatupad because of DAP. At marami pang iba.
Did your staff dig up all this dirt on the Vice President?
No,
I mean, you went all the way back to the Zamboanga.
Yes, I've been critical of the Vice President ever since sapagkat namamangka siya lagi sa dalawang ilog. Hindi makita ang kanyang tunay na kulay. He wants his cake and eat it too. At the expense of the Liberal Party, at the expense of the President. Imagine a situation wherein coalition partner namin ang una sa House. Kung may successes ang Aquino administration, kasama sila. Pag may failure, sila ang unang nagkikriticize sa administration. His daughter, Congresswoman Abby Binay, is a member of the coalition in the House, while his other daughter in the Senate is a member of the opposition. Magulo eh.
But aren't all political families like that all over the country?
Yeah,
you don't have all your eggs in one basket?
Yes.
Di ba ganon?
Oo nga, pero
Di ba ganon ang Filipino
kaya
political
ang
family?
Kaya nga ang masasabi ko, I'm really against this kind of politics. I filed a bill. Fortunately, it's now in the plenary, yung anti-political dynasty. Tapos, I'm really against turncoatism. It's not about personalities. It should be party platforms. Kaya Kaya naglakas ng loob ako na unang-unang magsalita laban sa ginagawang manipulasyon ng ating pangalawang Pangulo.
Let me go back to some things you mentioned a while ago, sir. Why do you use those lines? Hindi siya nagpapakita ng tunay na kulay at yung he wants to have his cake and eat it too. Are you referring, when you say he wants to have his cake and eat it too, are you referring to the cakes that the Makati City government? And when you say hindi siya nagpapakita ng tunay na kulay, are you referring to the color of his skin?
It's either because as a cabinet member, she's supposed to be an alter ego of the president. Pero he's also the leader of the opposition. Sabi niya sa opposition, walang iwanan. Pero sabi niya rin kay Pangulo, best friend tayo. So, whenever there are good points in the administration, kasama siya. Pag kami nagkamali o may pagkukulang, sa halip na tulungan niya, puntas naman siya sa kabila.
But unless you change the electoral system, then that's the only time that we can elect both the president and the vice president together in one ballot, di ba?
Well, pero sa ngayon dapat siguro ang ating meron tayong yung loyalty creed ng APO ng Boy Scout. Di ba sinasabi if you work for an organization, work to the fullest. You should not find fault in your organization. Kung nakita mo na talagang mali na yung organization mo, you should get out and then criticize at your heart's content. Pero hindi gano'n ang pangalawang Pangulo.
So criticism and democracy don't go together?
Well, there must be a clear delineation between opposition and administration. I think we owe it to our people that there's really check and balance.
Okay. Earlier on, also, sir, you said, Congressman Arisa, you said that this should be about party platforms. No?
Yes.
So why doesn't the Liberal Party just talk about its platform for the 2016 elections? After all, it's just a year and a half from now, and talk about your candidate.
Well, the Liberal Party is not yet in the election mode. Our platform is clear, tuwid na daan. And the President has set a direction. And I think 2 weeks ago, the Cabinet has a pledging session. They know their direction except for the Vice President.
Marami pa bang lalabas na masama tungkol sa Vice President?
Well, palagay ko, yun yung kalakaran niya eh.
So meron pa kayong ilalabas
for the past 27 years in Makati, it's a common knowledge. Maski ako, hindi ako taga Makati. Alam ko yung mga nangyayari at alam ko siguro lalabas ito sapagkat ang pangunahing naglalabas nito kaibigan niya, kasama niya, kasabot niya. Si Vice Mayor Mercado, yung kanyang chief ng GSO, si Mr. Hetchanova, ang kanyang councilor, si Councilor Espillaga. Of course, they know each other. Alam nila yung mga ginagawa nila.
Yeah. So ano pa bang ilalabas ninyo about the Vice President?
Hindi po ako. Hindi po ako. Ang sa akin more of I am more on policies, I am more on I'm just defending the party. So
defending the party
from the attacks of for the past 4 years.
From the attacks of the Vice President.
Yes, and
but he's been attacking. He's been fighting back because he's being attacked.
No, ang unang-unang nagsalita ng laban sa Liberal Party ay si Vice President Binay. Whenever there will be negative reports against him, he will just point to Secretary Marojas, to the Liberal Party, to Senator Dillon. Siya ang unang gumawa niyan. Kaya nga ako lumabas, kaya ako speech sa House dahil every time there will be negative reports, he attributes this to politics and the usual suspect is the Liberal Party.
So why doesn't the Liberal Party start talking about Marojas, who is supposed to be the party's sentimental favorite?
We have a process. We have a process. The process of selecting our candidate starts next year. So we abide by our process.
We'll have to take a short break. News.PH will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is News.PH. I'm Pio Ontiveros. Our guest, Congressman Egay Erice. Congressman Erice, the President gives the Vice President a Yolanda housing job. What does that mean? Akala ko ba pinapaalis na niya?
I don't know. I really don't know that. I was surprised by that move of the president. However, he must have his reasons.
And you agree with his reasons?
I
Whatever
think
they may be. You agree with the move?
my opinion in this matter is not important.
It's not important.
Yes.
No, but what would you have preferred? Not umalis na lang si VP?
Hindi ko alam
Na hindi
may-
na siya maging miyembro ng
The
gabinete.
president has more information than me, so maybe he has his reasons, and I trust the president that he will do the right thing at the right time.
Okay. The debate, scheduled debate between Senator Trillanes and the Vice President, for a while we weren't sure kung matutuloy at kanina lang there was an announcement na matutuloy na raw on November 27. What do you expect from that debate?
No, I don't think that the vice president is sincere about appearing in the Senate, doing a debate. Siya yung naghamon tapos siya yung urong-sulong. He's buying for time. He's going around the country trying to pull the people that it's a fight between the poor and the rich, that the rich don't want him to be president. No. But the issue
That isn't true, that the rich, the elite don't want him to be president. Hindi totoo yun.
He's richer than the rich. After his 27 years in Makati, he's richer than the rich.
Okay.
So, kalokohan to. At ang issue ng kahirapan, nag-uugat sa korupsyon. At ang perfect example at ang korupsyon nag-uugat sa maraming bagay, pero isang pinakamalaking dahilan sa aking pag-aaral, ito yung personal advocacy ko, is political dynasties. And the Vice President is the perfect example of dynastic families whose greed for power and wealth is insatiable. 9 years siyang mayor, nilagay niya yung asawa niya tapos bumalik siya, 9 years, inilagay niya naman yung anak niya. Hindi pa siya nakakontentong vice president, mayor yung anak niya, yung isang anak niya, ginawa niyang congressman, congresswoman. Yung isang anak niya, nagbe-bake lang ng cake, ginawa niya senador. This is greed. This is greed.
Well, they're not the only political family that's like that.
Yes,
di ba?
but he's aiming for the highest position in the land.
Okay. Yeah, but let's go back to the so-called the scheduled debate. You think that it's not going to push through?
I don't think so. Matatakot si Vice President, hindi niya alam kung ano yung mga ilalabas na dokumento ni Senator Trillanes. Hindi niya alam kung ano yung mga nakatago pa. Maraming...
Si Senator Trillanes lang ba talagang naghukay ng mga dokumento na yan? Or
Well, I think the source is
tumulong sa
Vice
kanya Liberal
Mayor...
Party?
No, I think the source is Vice Mayor Mercado. I'm very sure of that. Kasi ano sila magkasanggang dikit. Of course, I'm having some talks with parang chat with Senator Trillanes. 24 years yung kaibigan si Vice Mayor Mercado.
Yeah.
So, marami siyang mga entrusted na mga documents kay Vice Mayor Mercado na nakalimutan niya na kay Vice Mayor Mercado pala. So, palagay ko matatakot siya. Hindi niya alam kung ano yung... Pabago-bago na sila ng statements
At sa tingin mo, hindi matutuloy ang debate ngayon?
Hindi, matatakot siya.
Matatakot.
Kung sa journalist, ayaw niyang sumagot ng mga questions Direkta pa kay Senator Trillanes.
What about tomorrow's scheduled hearing of the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee? Do you think he's going to appear there?
No, I think he's in Cebu now. Hindi, ano lang yun, drama lang nila yun. A-attend, pero kinukumbinsin ng mga spokesperson niya na huwag umattend. It's not, dapat humarap na lang kung may walang tinatago.
Okay.
Palagi ko.
Yeah. What
Humarap
is
na lang.
what is the
I
object?
think
Yeah.
no, when he attended a meeting with the CBCP, pagkatapos na wala na siyang hindi niya he didn't give any details of what happened, what transpired during the meeting. I have some information that he failed to convince the religious sisters and the bishops.
What is the objective of the Liberal Party when it comes to Vice President Binay? Do you want him to just resign from the administration, from the cabinet of President Noynoy Aquino, or do you want him to throw in the towel and not run for president?
No, no,
Ano ba yung objective ng partido?
Objective
Ano
ng
bang gusto niyo mangyari?
Ang objective ng partido is to go on with the to push through with the reform agenda of President Aquino.
Yes,
And
I understand that, sir. I understand that. But my question is,
It can only happen if we will have a successor coming from the Liberal Party.
so that means, okay, so if, that will only happen if the successor is a Liberal Party member.
Yes.
Then you're talking about it's either Mar Rojas, the sentimental favorite, so-called, or somebody else.
Yes.
So, kaya nga ang sinasabi ng mga tao, hayaan yung mangampanya silang dalawa. Or ano ba talagang gusto mangyari ng Liberal Party? Ayaw niyong tumakbo si Vice President Binay.
Hindi, tumakbo siya. Pero
Tumakbo siya.
ako personally, I will have to tell the truth about him. Dapat yung mga kumakandidatong Pangulo, dumadaan yan sa masusing pagsusuri ng mga mamayan. Kumbaga sa gold, di ba? Dumadaan yan sa paggiling.
Yeah.
So, para lumabas, kung makita natin kung gold nga o tanso.
So the Liberal Party is so the Liberal Party is breaking the Vice President over the coals. Para
Well, not
lumabas
the
yung
Liberal
totoong
Party kasi maraming yung mga kasama ko, hindi naman kumikibo. It's only a few of us. I started it all. Pero even Secretary Rojas, hindi naman nakikialam. Hindi, wala, deadma lang siya. Kasi ang maririnig kong sinasabi niya, he sought the position pero hindi niya nakuha in the past.
Yeah.
So, kung ano lang ibigay sa kanya, okay sa kanya.
Pero so ang gusto niyo mangyari is dumaan sa masusing
Proseso. Kaya nga may
investigasyon si Vice President Jojo Binay. And because
there
of
are
that,
allegations, there are serious allegations, and I think it's just fair na maimbestigahan ito. Ngayon, kung may iba pang...
Iniimbestigahan na nga ngayon sa Senado, di ba?
So, okay yan. Walang problema yan. Ngayon,
Are you hoping that because of those investigations, that the ratings of the Vice President, the survey rankings especially, will further decline?
I'm hoping that the truth will be out. And
no, but let's tie it in
if the
with what
truth
you
will be
want.
out,
Kasi,
if the truth will be out, I'm sure if the people don't want a corrupt president.
Yes.
So, hindi siya iboboto.
Ang sabi niyo kasi kanina, ang gusto niyo mangyari is matuloy yung reform agenda ng Pangulo. At for that to happen, kailangan ang ihahalal, the one who will be elected, is a
Capable
successor, a Liberal Party member. Okay, so it will help. In other words, if you look at the political landscape, it will help your candidate kung mas lalong babagsak si VP Binay sa survey rankings.
Pero ang ikababagsak naman ng isang tao, yung sarili niya, mga gawa. So there will be we finally anoint somebody for the presidential race. Siguro it's also the role of the opposition na i-test naman itong kandidato na ito.
Okay. Before we go, Congressman Erice, what is this investigation of Senator Drilon and the Iloilo Convention Center all about? What are you trying to show here?
Well, actually, nag-suggest ako, tinext ko nga si Senator Drilon. So, why don't you just sponsor a resolution to investigate the Iloilo and face the Senate.
Para bang investigahan niyo ako? Sige, go ahead.
Go ahead. Palagay ko yun naman ang ginawa. At iimbestigahan na next week ng Ribbon Committee. Ako rin, siyempre, of course, Senator Dillon is the chairman of the is the vice chairman of the party. So it's really important to note, ano ba, tuwid na daan ba tayo? So I did some little investigation of the matter. Yes, gusto ko.
Inimbestigahan mo si Senator Dillon.
Oo, kasi medyo nakakaintindi naman ako ng konti sa engineering. So, mali naman yung sinasabi na the Iloilo Convention Center is only 6,000 square meters. It's 11,000 square meters.
Okay.
So it's not 100,000 per square meters. It's 60,000 pesos per square meter. Ang sabi nila, mahal daw yun dahil mga 30,000 lang daw yung industry standard. Totoo naman na ang industry standard floor area for a quite good building is only 30,000 per square meter. Pero ito, iba naman to. Kasi ang standard building, ang height, 3 meters lang. Ito 7.
Height meaning from floor to ceiling.
Ito 7. 7 meters from floor to ceiling. At makita naman natin, may architectural improvisations yung building.
So you're saying walang anomalya dito?
I'm saying na nasa industry standards as far as convention centers. Yung the Iloilo Convention, the Cebu City Convention Center is mas maliit dito. Pero 850 million.
Yeah. Okay, final question. What does it mean kung pareho lang ang construction firm? Contractor? Hillmarks?
Well,
pareho
ang
lang
Hillmark
sa
naman,
Makati,
ang Hillmark lumalabas akin ding sa akin pagsusuri. Ang Hillmark, may dalawang group. Merong matino, merong hindi. Actually, they're doing Rockwell eh. They're doing Rockwell.
Okay. What do you mean? May factions?
No. Parang pwede sa hindi matino, pwede sa matino. So, yan yung So, yung tingin ko, kasi depende yun sa implementing agency.
Okay.
So, ganyan naman yung mga construction firm. Gusto nila makakuha ng trabaho. Kung yung implementing agency mahigpit,
yes. Okay.
They will follow the rule.
Alright.
Pero kung yung implementing agency may kalokohan, para makuha nila, sasayaw sila sa kalokohan. Yan yung kalakaran ng construction industry.
And on that note, sa kalakaran ng construction industry, thank you very much to our guest tonight, Congressman Egay Erice. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you, Pia.
News.PH will be right back with a special on the first anniversary of Super Typhoon Yolanda. Super Typhoon Yolanda, or Haiyan, struck the central Philippines in the early morning hours of November 8, 2013. But as the horror of the devastation unfolded, it became obvious that the entire country had been brought to its knees by a storm so powerful that none of its kind had ever been recorded. Andrew Stevens of CNN International was in Tacloban, and he had this story to tell.
It struck with terrifying and deadly force. The aftermath, Tacloban City's shattered landscape. This was home to thousands. It was not the wind that did it. It was a storm surge. Reports of a 5-meter wall of water that engulfed the coastal strip and spread through the city. Even where the CNN crew was sheltering, about a kilometre from the shoreline, the surge was waist deep and powerful. All around us you hear the sounds of windows breaking, you hear the sounds of large objects falling and crashing to the floor, and underfoot it is now just a deluge. And if you look behind me, I don't know if you can see it, the staircase behind me is now basically a waterfall. But that didn't compare with what happened here. The storm surge was the most destructive part of this typhoon. We're about 100 metres or so from the water here, and you can see the damage caused. These houses, these are all rough-built houses, completely flattened along the foreshore. Thousands of people live along a stretch of several kilometres, and you can see behind me just how bad it must have been. Authorities had pleaded with people to leave. Many did, but many stayed. This man was searching for his father, his brothers and his uncle somewhere, he thinks, under this rubble. We all tried to leave, but it was too late. I got separated when the water started rising. I don't know what happened to them, he tells me. The devastation across the entire city of 200,000 people is widespread. Winds upward of 250 kilometres an hour, leaving a trail of destruction. This is now a city on edge. No power, food and water running out, and medical supplies almost gone. St Paul's Hospital, we're told, is the only functioning medical facility in the city. They can't admit any more patients. There's no room, just first aid in the most difficult of conditions.
We have no more rooms, no more support.
We hardly have anything left to help people with, the doctor tells me. We have to get supplies in immediately. Just a block away from the hospital, the increasingly desperate search for food and water leads to looting. This is one of the few stores which is left open, and as you can see, the crowds have been forming around these stores, taking anything they can. Food is the priority at the moment, but air conditioning units, plastic toys, everything is coming out of these stores. Another street away, people are climbing up a lamppost to get to the second floor of a department store to grab anything they can. It took a full day before help arrived. And even though the storm was predicted days in advance, the response so far has not been nearly enough. This was nature at its most frightening, a display of force that has smashed the lives of so many people. And this is just one city. There are countless towns up and down the coast where authorities are still waiting to hear word from. Andrew Stevens, CNN, Tacloban City, Central Philippines.
Tacloban, 1 year later. That is what Miguel Ortilla will show us. He's standing by at the Daniel Romualdez Airport in the city most devastated by Haiyan. Miguel?
Well, Pia, this is where the first glimpse of that story came from, as in the morning of November 9th, it was the manager of Daniel Z. Romualdez Airport that gave the first radio message to Kaap in Manila that there were apparently 100 bodies lying on the streets heading to the airport and even close to the tarmac. Take note, 100 bodies. That figure would eventually bloat to 6,000 dead in what could have been the strongest typhoon that hit the Philippines. We're here at the Tacloban Airport, and I'd like to show you now some of the structures. Pia, you were here when it looked like chaos and exodus. Everywhere you see mercy flights all over this airport. Now you can see that the structure that could barely hold itself then is already about completed, almost completed rather. It's operational already. If you go inside, the ticketing booths are open, the counters as well as the check-in counters are already functioning. However, there are still certain limitations here at this airport. If you could see this tarmac, for now, only small planes, small propeller planes, about 70 seaters, are allowed to land in this airport, as there's asphalt overlay in a certain portion, about 600 meters, that is still left to be repaired. According to government, it will be completely repaired by February of next year. Now, when Typhoon Yolanda hit this portion of the roof here, the storm surge was so strong that the water even reached beyond the roof of this airport. So just imagine the impact and the destruction that it made. As you can see now, it seems like repairs and government interventions are working well in this airport, but it might be a different story, Pia, if you go beyond this airport and if you go down to the different communities. Earlier, we were in Barangay 89 rather, in Tacloban City. Also, about 450 people died in that village. And according to them, most of the people are still reeling from the disaster, still having difficulty in moving forward and moving on and recovering. They say that the DSWD, the Social Welfare Department, promised them 30,000 pesos for every family who lost their homes completely, and 15,000 pesos for those who partially lost their houses. But up to now, they're still still waiting for that promise to be fulfilled. Pia?
Thank you. Miguel Ortilla reporting to us from Tacloban City. David Santos was on Ground Zero, a town called Guiuan in the province of Eastern Samar, the place where Haiyan made the first of its 6 landfalls. And a year to the day, David is back there in Guiuan. He joins us from there. David.
Well, Pia, as you can probably see, a concert is being staged here at the Guiuan Town Plaza tonight as part of a series of events in remembrance of last year's tragedy brought about by Typhoon Yolanda. Earlier, a photo exhibit was also open to the public, bringing back grim but moving images taken in the aftermath of the deadly disaster. Now, a number of folk alternative artists like Gary Granada and Cookie Chua, along with other musicians, partnered with aid organizations to reach out to victims of last year's typhoon. Event organizers are aiming to deliver psychosocial intervention by entertaining residents here with music, with some of the songs written by local artists drawn out from their personal Yolanda experience. A segment of this concert will be dedicated to a solemn recollection of last year's tragic events, remembering those who perished, more than 100 of them here in Guiuan, as well as an opportunity for the survivors to reflect and discern on how that tragedy impacted their personal lives. Now, joining us now is Dr. Oscar Perez of the Immaculate Conception Clinic and Hospital here in Guiuan. Doc Oka and his team played a crucial role in helping out a lot of Yolanda victims last year to a point their hospital was overrun with patients. Well, in retrospect, Doc Oka, tell us, how has Yolanda changed your life, especially your vacation as a doctor?
Well, I have decided to stay here on a long-term basis. When we talked last year, immediately after Yolanda, I was talking about short-term goals and short-term plans. Now we are talking of long-term planning, of bringing in, together with the hospital, services for the Guiuananons, the medical services for the Guiuananons. This is already a long-term plan.
Doc Oka is actually from Batangas. He chose to be assigned here in Guiuan. Doc, your contract was only supposed to be 2 years, but as you've said, you decided to stay on. How is your family reacting to this?
Well, my family has always been supportive of everything, of every endeavor, especially the professional endeavor. My wife is also a doctor, and my children grew up with this, so they understand.
Maybe one last question, maybe, Doc Oka. As a non-resident of Guiuan, what are your thoughts? What could be the biggest lesson people here could have learned from the Yolanda experience?
I think the people of Guiuan should have learned to choose their leaders well. Coming elections, coming times when they have to really choose the best leaders who will serve them. That is the best lesson I could.
Very briefly, why? How does that relate to being prepared to a disaster like Yolanda?
Because their leaders, these people would really look up to their leaders, and their leaders should be with them during they should be visible during the time of confusion. So they should learn to choose their leaders well.
Thank you very much, Doc Oka. Not only for this opportunity, but also for taking care of us. Actually, Pia, I hope you indulge me on this. This guy actually was responsible for taking care of us, taking us in at the height of Typhoon Yolanda last year, taking us in the hospital. Of course, we thank you. We thank you, Pia. Of course, we've never said this publicly before. We thank you. We thank the network in behalf of my crew who were stranded for a couple of days here in Guiuan, for checking on us, looking for us, and making sure we go home safe to our families. We also thank. I'm sure the residents of Guiuan are also relaying their message of thanks. You know, Pia, the anniversary, if you agree with me, Doc Oka, the first year anniversary of the Yolanda is not more than just remembering the tragic memories of the disaster, but also it's an opportunity of Thanksgiving to thank the many people, the soldiers, the policemen, the aid workers, the volunteers, students, church organizations, strangers who, like Doc Oka here, came forward and lend a hand during a very difficult time. So again, thank you very much, Doc Oka. Thank you to you, Pia. Back to you.
Well said, David Santos. Not just remembering, but Thanksgiving also. David Santos there from Guiuan in Eastern Samar. We'll be right back. CNN sent many teams to Leyte and Samar to cover Haiyan's destruction. One team was headed by Anderson Cooper. Among the many stories Anderson gathered and told were people's stories, people he met on the road while he walked from the airport, people who had lost almost everything, beloved children, the roofs above their heads, and yet had the courage to share the little that they had.
We want to go live now to CNN's Anderson Cooper, who is in Tacloban, a town left completely flattened by the storm surge. Anderson, we hear the mayor is urging people there to get out of town as quickly as possible.
And people are certainly heeding that warning. They've been trying to get out, frankly, for 5, now moving into the 6th day since the storm. I mean, I can tell you about 300 feet, 400 feet from where I'm standing, there is already a line of people, and they have been standing all night, many of them standing all day yesterday, just waiting, residents here, just waiting for Philippine military aircraft to come. They come about once or twice a day and get some people on those C-130 planes, get them to Manila, get them to Cebu, or just basically get them anywhere but here. People just are desperate to get out. There is really, in the direction all behind me, Jake, there is really nothing. I mean, the houses are gone, the shacks are gone, people are still looking for food, still desperate for water. Even the people standing in line here at the airport will come up to you with an empty water bottle and you know, ask you if you have any water. Supplies are running low for everybody. And you talked about the aid coming in. It is coming in the last 24 hours, the last 12 hours in particular. There has been a big uptick on it. Brigadier General Kennedy, the Marine General in charge of this operation here at the airport, promised to get the airport up and running on a 24-hour basis. He has done that. Planes have been coming in during the night. There is aid stacked up. I just walked by, pallets and pallets of it from USAID, tarps, thousands of tarps that could be used for people to shelter under these the brutal heat, under the rain that comes in intermittently. But the problem, as you say, is getting it out from this airfield now to the communities, even to communities, you know, a mile away from here, half a mile away from here. There aren't trucks. There's not fuel. We're running out of fuel to even broadcast. It is a very, very dicey situation here. And the bottom line is more needs to come, more logistics, more trucks, more fuel in order to actually get this aid to the people who need it most.
Anderson, is there any indication that the Philippines government knows that the problem is getting all the aid and the tarps that you are talking about that are right near you, that they know that they need to be able to provide soldiers or police or whomever to provide that to the survivors who need it, and that those reinforcements are coming to do that job? Or is everybody just sitting around waiting and wondering when help like that will arrive?
You know, there are hundreds of Philippine police and military here at the airport and elsewhere at roadblocks and such, but you don't see them out going block by block searching for bodies, searching for, you know, I haven't seen any search and rescue operations even in the immediate days after the storm. You know, you think back to the tsunami in Japan back 2 years ago or 3 years ago, within a day there were Japanese defense forces out they didn't have heavy earth-moving equipment. They were just out on foot, walking block by block. You know, they divided up communities. That has not happened here. People are left to their own devices. I was with a mother who was searching for her 6 dead children yesterday. She'd found 3 of them. She'd have to carry their bodies, place them under some sacks, but she was still looking for her 3 other children, her husband. She'd already found his body, and there's just no one to help these people. People here are very resilient. They're used to being abandoned by their government for generations, for decades certainly, and there's not a high expectation on the part of a lot of people here of outside help or governmental help, and that is certainly, their expectations have certainly been met. I think, the government must know what's going on. It's just a question of ability and logistics. There are not the trucks available to get aid out here. That's something certainly the Marines are hoping to work on in the next couple of days, but it's still a very desperate situation.
That's so heartbreaking, Anderson. I know you did an aerial tour of the damage today. You'll be showing that on your show later this evening. What did you see out there? Give us some perspective of just how bad things are in some of these towns.
Yeah, we went out with the Marines in their Osprey aircraft, which have now started to fly, which really allow them to get into some places that others have not been able to get into. So we went to a nearby island, about a 30-minute flight from here, called Samar. Again, it's devastation. It's one island after another all along the south that's just destroyed. We landed with a member, a captain from the Philippine Special Forces from the Navy, and he was talking to the people. He was trying to get an assessment of the damage. And the bottom line, the message is more supplies. We need food. We need water. And in these small communities, there's only about, according to this captain, only about 15 or 20% of these communities that have actually been assessed. So there's still a lot we don't know about what's going on in some of these outlying places.
All right, Anderson Cooper in Tacloban, thank you so much. Stay safe, my friend. We want to go.
The day Haiyan struck, as people began to emerge from their homes and from the debris, many of them made their way to the airport, hoping to get out. But the airport was closed, and it was only the Air Force's C-130s that were flying to and from Manila and Tacloban and Mactan and Tacloban. On Sunday, November 10, 2 days after Haiyan, we were on a plane that flew to Mactan, where we picked up people who wanted to go to Manila in what would be one of many humanitarian flights several airlines would mount. It was supposed to be a flight to Tacloban, but the Civil Aviation Authority would not allow AirAsia to land in the Tacloban airport. So the decision was to land in Mactan and then get on the C-130 bound for Tacloban. It was a humanitarian flight to bring a 129-man contingent from the National Capital Region's Police Regional Public Safety Battalion, Philippine National Red Cross personnel, and a cargo load of relief goods, and to bring survivors back to Manila.
Captain Dexter, Commendador speaking. I'd like to welcome you aboard RPC 8987, AirAsia Zest's relief flight to Mactan, and with your continuing flight to Tacloban via C-130.
But we landed in Mactan Air Base at 4:26 in the afternoon, so it would be too late for the C-130 to fly us to Tacloban. This C-130 would not be able to fly out, they said, but it had brought in evacuees from Tacloban. And our long-lost news crew, David Santos and his cameraman, Alvin Villafranca, and assistant cameraman, Harold Barras, who were only too happy to have survived the onslaught of Super Typhoon Yolanda as it made its first landfall in the town of Guiuan. There were many other people on board that C-130 who looked as if they had just stepped out of a war zone, many of them bringing what was left of their belongings, holding on to their children, like this young woman who lived through what she and her child must have thought was the end of the world. This was her first phone call to the outside world since Yolanda struck. And of course, there were the injured. They were the walking wounded. Young and old, they needed to be brought to the hospital for medical attention. This man cradled his little boy in his arms. Soldiers lifted this man in his wheelchair onto an emergency vehicle. Some of the evacuees asked to send messages to their relatives. And some still didn't even know where their family was.
Tamaan ng malaki na kahoy at saka dito. Nasa dagat ako. Tamaan ng kahoy. Was out talaga. Katapos yung asawa ko, sinusyukaw, nawawala at saka yung eldest ko na anak na lalaki. Mamatay kami.
The humanitarian flight we took into Mactan was the same flight many of these survivors, these evacuees, would take back to Manila. It was obvious they wanted to get out.
Okay, ma'am. Ito wala problema. Makakasakay na po tayo.
While the evacuees were signing up for the free flight back to Manila, the relief goods we had brought in were loaded onto the C-130. And then it was time to go home. On the plane, some of the survivors got to make the most heartbreaking phone calls they would ever have to make.
Ang asawa ng mayor, patay nga ni. Oo, patay Christina ba? Patay nga ni. Grabe ano.
Arriving at your destination is usually a happy moment, but not for those who survived Yolanda. What made it easier for many of them was that their families were waiting for them to welcome them home. There are no words for tragedies that engulf a family, or the realization that you survived what could have been your last day on earth. The story about Haiyan was not just about the raging waters of a storm surge no one was prepared for, but it was also a story about how human desperation would stare us all in the face. Going to an evacuation center here in Capiz and speaking to those who've sought refuge there is almost like intruding into their lives. But being Filipino, the evacuees welcome our questions and our camera. They want their story told. This man says he and his family have no more home to return to. But he counts his blessings. There are relief goods every day, he says.
Isang ganta na bigas at saka sardinas, noodles.
And that is what his family has for dinner, by the light of 2 candles. Children are the most vulnerable during, but more so in the aftermath of a disaster. They are exposed to the elements. No crib for a bed, but the concrete floor and their mat is better than nothing at all. Filipinos have a copyright on hospitality, so as we pass by the stable, a woman calls out to us. Let's eat, ma'am, she says, inviting us to partake of their meager portions. And she says it with the warmest of Filipino smiles. When Sally Daria evacuated before the storm, she took her worldly possessions and her life savings with her, the contents of her sari-sari store. Sally says the mayor of the town, Steve Contreras, sent an ambulance to evacuate them to this shelter. Sally is also a barangay health worker. In milder disasters, she would have been a first responder. But as Yolanda's wrath has shown, everyone was a victim. Joel Bernades survived Yolanda, but he is suffering from hydrocephalus. When he was born, doctors gave him 3 days to live.
Sabi ko, kung yan naman ang sa bata ko, ayaw ko na lang yun. Kaya ko lang ipagpadala.
He turns 27 on Monday. It isn't clear yet if he and his family will be home in time for his birthday, or at least in time for Christmas. She cradles Joel in her arms. She speaks to him. He mumbles an answer, but she understands exactly what he's trying to say. The utter helplessness of someone who has become a victim twice over makes you wish for a cure, a way out, because he has suffered more than enough. And it is the indescribable suffering of those who survived a storm but are barely surviving its aftermath that gets you thinking. What does it mean to be more human, to be humanitarian, post-disaster? The answer stares us in the face, right there in an evacuation center. It means we should look out for one another. It means to build back better and to strive for nothing less. All of us together, including journalists whose role is to shine the light on that which the world should know about. Yolanda, after all, is not just a story. Pia Ontiveros, 9 News. Haiyan, Yolanda, we must never forget. Thank you for joining us. See you next Wednesday. Good night.